Today, I wanted to share with you some tips on how to take your business virtual for the next 30, 60, 90 days. Honestly, we're just not sure which way COVID-19 is going, but it does seem to be heading in the direction of more restrictions on small business in terms of being able to operate in person, and it's really driving all of us virtual. This applies for anyone from a small business all the way up to a Fortune 500 corporation. And a number of years ago, I made the decision to take our company, Then Change Marketing, completely virtual. So we actually do not have a physical office space. All of our team members work from home, and that creates a great deal of flexibility for us, which in times like this, I'm especially grateful because we're able to continue operations and not miss a beat. It's taken us a number of years to get the model right in terms of being able to not only have the right tools in place, but also just the right processes, the right culture. There's many, many nuances to taking your business virtual, and especially for any of your employees who've never worked from home, it is a transition that needs to be recognized. So thought that it would be really helpful to share some tips that we've learned over the years in a number of areas. And the first really area that I wanted to touch on as we walk through the agenda here is talking about different industries and how creating a virtual solution can be different depending on the industry you're in, vastly different if you're a healthcare professional versus an attorney, for example. We'll talk about some of the tools and task management strategies that can help keep your team's productivity up as they move virtual. Review some of the communication tools and strategies that will help transition from the standard everyone in the office setting to being completely virtual. And then also create a plan that will remain sustainable for 90 plus days potentially. I really do believe that COVID-19, although it's certainly a shock to our system, will really create a rather drastic social change. I think any business who has not considered including a virtual component to how they operate, or for some businesses who might have dabbled a little in virtual, that this is certainly going to really push the envelope in terms of just how far we can take our businesses virtually. And it may even open up some opportunities for us to expand the type of business that we do because we can go virtual. So now maybe previously we weren't able to do business outside of our physical geography, and now if you can adopt a virtual model, then you can. The other change that I think this will really push is businesses becoming more digital, because it really is no longer an option as to whether or not you want to have a really rock solid website, whether or not you want to be on social media and active on social media, whether you want to start doing video, whether you want to launch a podcast. These are all now really going to be table stakes in terms of how you do business moving forward. So we'll certainly share some of those tips as we go through this discussion. So in terms of Virtual Business 101, some of the areas that I'd like to cover are communication, task management, and time tracking, which becomes much more important when not everyone is coming and going in the office in a way that's visible. So how do you keep on top of the work that your employees are doing, and how do they manage their own time when there's many distractions being in a home environment? File sharing and e-signing becomes much more important when we're sharing documents electronically. Visual collaboration. So there's a definite benefit to everybody being in a room together when it comes to brainstorming. How do you replicate that in a meeting? How do you still have a productive meeting when people are all in different locations? How to securely exchange information. So if somebody's giving you passwords, you don't want them to just email them to you. So what are some of the tools that you can use for that? Processes and procedures, and very importantly, culture and teamwork, which is something that we've learned a lot about as a team. So let's start out with some team communication tools. Now, what I'll do as I go through the tools is I'll highlight the tools that are, I believe, the most popular in industry, and then I'll let you know what we use, because having been, I'll call ourselves tool junkies over the years, we have tried so many different tool sets. And we really have wrapped our arms now around what integrates best, at least for our type of an environment. So I'm not saying that the tools that I'll recommend are the only ones that you can use, but I'll just let you know what works for us. So some of the different tools that you can use for internal chat are Slack, Skype, WhatsApp, Microsoft Teams, and there's a number of somewhat less known alternatives such as River, Glip, Twist, Fleep, and Flock. And I'm sure if you Google chat tools, you'll come up with a dozen more. The one that we've landed on, although we started with Skype, is we've landed on Slack. And Slack is a really great tool for business in that you can have various channels for different subgroups within your company. So teams that need to collaborate can have their own Slack channel. You can have Slack channels for specific topics. And even you can have Slack channels with your clients. You can set up different Slack environments if you're working with a larger team. It also integrates really nicely with some of the other tools that we use, which I'll talk about in a moment in terms of task management and document management. The other thing you'll want to think about in terms of team communication is internal video conferencing. So how are you going to have meetings and make it feel like you're still in the same room? Obviously, a number of tools here as well, including Zoom, Google Hangouts, Meeting Owl, and Join.me. The one that we've landed on is Zoom, and we have it set to auto record, which is really helpful in case somebody needs the information from a meeting but they weren't able to attend. Depending on the meeting, we may have video on or off, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we discuss culture. But Zoom we find to be a real industrial strength tool that has served us quite well, so definitely recommend that. Some of the considerations that you'll want to think about when choosing a chat tool or when actually implementing internal chat within your organization is, first of all, establishing time windows when employees should be logged on to chat, but do allow flexibility. So you'll likely have a core set of business hours where you do want everyone to be on chat at the same time, so you do get that collaboration. But do recognize that part of the benefit of being virtual is that people do have flexibility to handle other things that are going on in their lives, especially these days when a lot of people are home with their kids. So they're trying to balance, being preschool as well as being a productive employee. So that may mean that they need to get more done in the evening when the kids are asleep. I'll ask everyone to download the app on their phones for alerts. So if they do need to step away, go to another room from where their computer is, most people are carrying their phones around with them, even room to room within their home. And if they have the app on their phone, they'll get alerts when somebody's trying to reach them on chat. Also, structure your chat to keep it organized. So have a general channel, plus have different channels for each topic, for each client. Essentially the rule of thumb is if you would divide or carve off a separate group within your company to handle a particular topic, then you can make that a chat channel. And the reason why that's important is if you have everyone all in one chat group, then it just becomes really unwieldy trying to figure out who needs to respond to what. And it also just is distracting. So, it's really important to make sure that if you're asking questions, you ask it from within the group where they would be able to answer the questions. You'll also want to think about incorporating chat into your policies and procedures. So for example, if you need to step away, let the general channel know when you'll return. That's one of the rules that we have. So we're very, very flexible, but we do understand that when, sometimes if somebody needs to step away for an appointment or because they need to take care of something, we don't want another team member who has asked them a question on chat and is just left hanging waiting for the answer. Because sometimes if you know the person has stepped away, then you can move on to something else. But if you think you can get an answer right away, you'll sit there and wait. So understanding that difference is important. This is a big one. Don't assign tasks to people on chat because they'll get lost in the shuffle. So for those of you who've worked extensively with chat channels, you'll notice that there's a lot of conversation and it tends to just keep scrolling up. And if you've been away from that chat channel for a little bit and you come back in, there's going to be a whole conversation or several conversations that might have happened before you jumped in. So if you've assigned a task to somebody, it may have scrolled up 3 or 4 pages by that point, and they just might not see it and it'll get lost. So what we always make sure we do is whenever there's a task or something we're asking someone to do, we assign it as a task within our project management tool. And we actually have somebody on our team who, just in case people might have forgotten, goes through all of our chat channels on a regular basis, and anything that looks like it was a request or an assignment, make sure that that gets assigned as a task. Chit chat is okay for the general team-wide channel, but try to keep the topic channels focused on that topic so that those very specific comments or updates or questions don't get lost. There's a number of considerations also when you're thinking about video conferencing. So first of all, we recommend setting all videos, so our Zoom channel, for example, is they're set to automatically record. So if somebody can't make a meeting, or if you need to go back and you can't remember exactly, you check your notes and maybe you can't read what you wrote, or you know that a client said something, but now you need to go back and find it, it's really helpful to have a record of all of those. And we actually archive all of our videos within our online document storage. So if we need to go back and check a meeting, it can be really handy. And especially if you think about bringing a new person onto the team, let's say somebody new who's going to handle a client and you've already had the conversation with the client, in our case, talking about their brand and their priorities and their strategy. So being able to have that new person go back and listen to those original recordings can be super helpful in terms of getting them up to speed. We also have a 15-minute morning huddle every day. In this case, it's video optional, so that means most people have video turned off, but it's just a really good opportunity to check in and touch base on priorities and highlight any roadblocks that people have. A lot of companies, especially these days going virtual, will also have an end of day check-in. That's optional, but having the morning huddle we find to be really incredibly important just to keep everyone on track. On a weekly basis, we also have a 1-hour meeting with the team, and we have video on for this particular meeting. That was one of the lessons learned for us on culture, that while people found it kind of invasive to have every single meeting with video on, because sometimes honestly you're sitting at your desk not exactly looking video ready, but at least if you know for 1 hour a week that everyone's going to have video on, just being able to see their faces and connect is important. And we use that time to talk about more strategic topics or to hit on a learning topic. Whatever your expectations are regarding dress code, at least in front of clients when you're on video, just be sure to communicate that and also include it in your policies and procedures. So if you're business casual, then you should be business casual on video, which probably means not wearing your gym clothes while you're on video with a client. But your company is going to set your own dress code. It'll typically be a little bit more casual when people are working from home, but you still want everyone to look professional when they're in front of a client. Background noise. So this is a big one. Some companies, I find, especially with larger companies, it's as if people pretend that they have no children and they have no dogs and cats. But the reality is you're working from home and you do, and you need to just make sure that you have the expectations are set clearly with your employees as to whether or not background noise is okay. For us, we basically say that if it's an internal meeting, kids and dogs are fine. If there's background noise, there's really no big deal, because that's the reality of life. If you're on a client call, though, we ask that you try to make arrangements so that the background can be quiet, because otherwise it can be a little bit distracting. So some of the tools that you can think about for client communication, and client communication is going to cover a number of areas. So, one is going to be web chat. So you're going to think about having a chat tool on your website to communicate not only with clients, but with prospects or, the general public if they have questions. And there's a couple of tools out there that I'd like to highlight that we've found to be quite effective. One is TalkTo, TAWK.to. What's nice about that is it's free. Because it's free, it does have some limitations, so it's not a perfect tool. It'll do things like log you out and not tell you that it's logged you out. So you have to make sure, like with any chat, that the only way that somebody can chat with you is if there is someone actually logged into the app. So making sure that someone from your team is logged in is important, but the fact that it's free, super easy to install, and you can customize the look and feel of the chat box is nice. There's, if you want something that's a little bit more, I would say robust, then live chat is a great tool and integrates with a number of other workflow tools that you might use. And then if you're an attorney or a healthcare professional, there is a tool called Engage, N-G-A-G-E, and this is actually a manned chat tool. So they have a team who will be on your website monitoring your chat 24/7, and if someone asks a question, then their goal is to try to get them to the point of making an appointment or whatever your goal is for the chat. And so as they are sending you those leads, you basically specify, here's the type of lead that I want. And if the lead is not relevant to your business, then you can push back and not pay. So it's a pay by the lead. You don't pay monthly, which is nice. So they are motivated to try to get you leads, and it's not that expensive. It ranges from somewhere around like $20 to $35 a lead for that service, and especially nowadays that you may not always be able to effectively be on your website all the time or have your team ready. That having someone 24/7 on there can be really helpful, because more and more people are going to try to communicate with you digitally. And then group chat is something that we found to be very effective for communicating with our clients. And there's a number of tools you can use for this. There's Slack, there's Skype, there's WhatsApp. We've landed on WhatsApp, and we found that to be a very effective tool. So what we do is with each of our clients who use WhatsApp, we'll create a group WhatsApp chat for the people on our team who work on their account, and then for all of the people on the client's team who need to communicate with us. And that's a great way to just quickly ask questions, share pictures relevant to some of the things that we're working on, and even to the point of where we might have sent an email, but we'll give them a heads up on WhatsApp just so that they can go ahead and take a look in case it got lost in the shuffle. Video conferencing, again, we've got a number of tools out there. Zoom and Google Hangouts are probably the most popular. We do like Zoom, as I mentioned. Google Hangouts, I did see something where in light of COVID-19 that they've waived the fee for some of the Google Hangout services, so that would be something worth taking a look at. And then, of course, social media, you want to have people be able to reach out to you via Facebook chat, Instagram DM, LinkedIn chat, or message. And then the other thing to look at is on your Google My Business listing, you can set up chat as well, which is also really helpful for people to reach you if they're interested in your services. Now, group chat considerations when you're chatting with clients. So the first one that we've learned is that if the client doesn't already use a chat platform, then find another way to communicate, because if they don't have it on, it's not going to be an effective tool for you. And second is learn the client's communication style. So, sometimes clients are all over their emails, other times they aren't. So for clients who tend to get a lot in their inbox, it's not a bad idea to just send them a quick chat and let them know that there's something that they need to look at in their email. And also, really importantly, decide internally within your team who should lead the communications with the client, because it gets really confusing if you have somebody emailing a question and then somebody else asked that question in chat, and somebody else got on a call. So just make sure that you have one leader for communications with the client who can coordinate all of that activity.
And I just saw a quick question came up that somebody was asking about Engage. What if that chat tool sends me a lead that's not relevant to my business? You decline it, and then you don't actually end up paying for the lead. So that's part of, you set the criteria with them up front as to the types of leads that you want. So for example, you're an attorney, and let's say you practice business law and you get a lead that comes in for immigration. Well, you decline that, and you would not end up having to pay for that lead.
Now, some other communications best practices that we've learned is on team or internal communication. Use a project management tool to keep track of all of your request tasks, to do action items, even your follow-up. So sometimes, especially when you're working virtually, you got a lot going on, and you might have sent a chat message to a client, but it's not a bad idea to open a task for yourself and say, follow up with client ABC on such and such, just so that you remember to go back and check. I know that sounds like overkill, but when you've got a lot of things going on, being able to, at the start of your day, go and look at a tool and see your entire to-do list can be very helpful. And then in terms of client communication, use Google Calendar integrations, assuming you use Google, or Outlook Calendar, whatever it is that you use for your calendaring tool. But whatever communication tool you're using, always make sure that you're confirming the appointment or call beforehand. Especially when you're working virtually, and there may be some distractions going on for your client, that just reaching out and saying, hey, just checking, we've got this call in half an hour, is this still good for you, is not a bad idea, because depending on whether or not people have their notifications turned on, they may completely let the time slip, and then that allows you to end up working inefficiently if you're not careful. So now let's talk about some task management tools and best practices. There are a myriad of project management tools that you can implement to help manage your tasks. If you're a smaller organization, then something like Asana is a good starting tool. There's other tools like Basecamp, Monday, Trello, which tends to be a very visual tool, so that works well for designers and for less complex projects. We've used a bunch of different project management tools, and the one that we've landed on is Teamwork. We like Teamwork because it's very visual. You can add colored tags to different tasks in order to categorize things. You can easily filter tasks, so you can see, all of a certain employee's late tasks that relate to a particular client project, for example, which just makes managing a lot easier. And Teamwork is actually divided into 3 tools. There is Teamwork Project, which is the project task management tool that I described. There is Teamwork Desk, which is the ticketing system, and that allows you to, for example, have every email that goes to a particular support email or copies that support email that can automatically open a ticket. In addition, you can have a form on your website that would automatically open a ticket. So that just, if you do get a lot of emails, it just helps avoid things falling through the cracks. And then Teamwork has a third piece, which is Teamwork Spaces. And within Spaces, you can create like little mini internal websites, if you will. So if you can kind of picture a page with tiles, and each one of those tiles, you can drill down and see a number of pages related. So if you have a project, so for us, for example, for each of our clients, we have a little mini internal website, and we talk about their scope and their brand preference and their content calendar, and where their assets are located, and we can link to other places where we might have information that we need in order to deliver their services. So that can be really helpful, and you can also create internal spaces. So for example, we have our policies and procedures manual spaces. We have a spaces that we use that we bring up when we have our weekly meetings. So we're keeping track of whatever the topic of the week is and our KPIs and all the other things that we need to discuss. And then time tracking is the other piece that you want to make sure that you have some plan for when everybody works virtually. And depending on your company, this may be more or less important. In our world, being in a consulting world, it is we live and breathe by hours. So we want to make sure that if we have sold a project and it has 10 hours, that we are delivering all of that time in terms of what our clients have paid for, and we're not over delivering on that time. So it's really helpful for us to be able to get a snapshot of work at any time and understand how many hours are remaining on that project, so we know if we can take on an extra task. There's a number of tools that you can use for time tracking. There's Harvest, Timely, TimeCamp, Toggle, EverHour, and Teamwork. And the one piece of advice that I would have is make sure that whatever time tracking tool you use, that it integrates with your project management tool, because you want to track your time against those tasks or against your project. So for that reason, we also use Teamwork for our time tracking. Considerations when you're looking at task management. So first of all, I recommend creating a hierarchy to organize your work. And that hierarchy is pretty standard from a project management perspective. So it's going to look like tasks sitting within a task list, which sit within a project. So example, we might have a project that is to stand up a COVID-19 communications microsite for a client. We could have task lists within that project that would be design tasks, copywriting tasks, and web development tasks. And then within those task lists, we can have a specific task that might be set up hosting environment. And that setup hosting environment would have a budgeted time associated with it and a person that it's assigned to and a due date. So that's how we structure all of our work. Each task you want to make sure has only one owner, and each project or client should have one owner. Now we have a good old corporate America matrix org chart. And what that basically means is that we have somebody on our team who is responsible for each of our lines of business for delivery. So we have someone who's responsible for delivering our websites. We have someone who's responsible for delivering our social media. We have someone who's responsible for delivering our AdWords, for example. And if you think of that as being the horizontal part of the org chart, and then vertically we have account managers, and it's the role of the account manager to coordinate all of the activities that the lines of business need to deliver in order to get a particular commitment completed for a client. So not saying that's the only way to organize, but after trying a number of different models over the years, and to be honest, having spent 26 years in corporate America before launching this company, I was shying away from the bureaucracy that sometimes a matrix organization can bring. But I guess there's a really good reason why most organizations in corporate America are structured that way, because it really does work. So each task, as I mentioned, should have a time budget, a due date, and make sure that your reports are able to show you your time that's been spent versus the budget, as well as your upcoming tasks and your overdue tasks. So you don't want to just be looking in the rearview mirror at your overdue tasks. You want your team to be able to go in at any given time and get a sense as to what's coming up for them in the next several days or even in the next several weeks, so they can plan their time accordingly. We also have KPIs that are our key performance indicators for anyone who's not familiar, which allow us to set clear metrics, so clear goals, numerical goals for everyone on the team, and we report openly on these monthly. So on one meeting a month, that Friday meeting is our KPI meeting. And during that meeting, we basically pull up everyone's KPIs in terms of their billable hours and how their projects have been performing, and how their lines of business have been performing. And this allows us to collectively, as a team, make sure that we're providing the right support to everyone on the team to help them to be successful.
We've got a question here. How would you be able to get the team to log time accurately if you time card in the office? So if you're looking at a virtual solution, then obviously your team is not, they're not punching the clock anymore. They're kind of virtually punching the clock. So the way that time is tracked in Teamwork, for example, and in a lot of these tools, is that you have a little clock timer, and when you go into a task, you can literally click on the clock timer and say, I've just started working on this task, and it'll just keep running the clock until you click on it again and say that I've stopped. It also gives you the opportunity to just enter the time. So if you know you spent 40 minutes on something, then you enter your minutes against that task. And a lot of this, this is the tool piece, but there's kind of a cultural and a training piece that goes together with this as well, just for people to kind of get their arms wrapped around the idea of time tracking.
All right, let's talk a little bit about secure file sharing and digital signature tools and some of the associated best practices. So again, there's any number of file sharing tools out there. There's Google Drive, Dropbox, OneHub. If you're a Microsoft shop, then OneDrive, SharePoint. And I'm not about to say that one is better than the other. I will tell you that we did start out with Dropbox, and we migrated to Google Drive. And part of the reasons why we migrated is that one is we found that stuff was getting lost in Dropbox. It just seemed to be a less intuitive way for us to structure where we stored our files. And then also because we are a G Suite organization, that there's some benefits to Google Drive in that from right within a particular folder, you can create documents or create spreadsheets. It just allows for a more intuitive structure. When you are setting up a Google Drive, we do recommend that you have drives that are internal to the company, and then you have drives that you share with the client, because that can be a really great way for them to just drop in documents that they need. And then digital signature is the other thing to think about. So there's a number of different software tools out there. There's DocuSign, HelloSign, PandaDoc, Concord, et cetera, et cetera. We have landed on DocuSign. It's actually the one that we've been using pretty much forever. One of the things I really like about DocuSign is that you can set up templates. So, for example, if you have a common master agreement that every one of your clients needs to sign, then you can set that up as a template with fillable fields. And then each time you have a new contract, you just literally copy the template, insert the client's information, and then send it out. It also has a reminder feature, which is really handy in case you've forgotten to follow up as to whether or not somebody signed something. So you can set however many days apart you want these reminders to go out in the event that somebody hasn't signed. So some of the considerations when you're looking at cloud file sharing is structure. So file sharing can become a total mess if it's not well managed. I've seen organizations where people have everything stored digitally and they can't find a thing. And usually they can't find a thing because the way that the files are structured, or that your folders are structured, is not intuitive, not consistent. Maybe the way they're naming the documents is inconsistent, and it's only as useful as your organization. So one of the things that I recommend is within your internal file structure that you separate active and inactive client folders, especially if you have a long list. So you just need to think logically as to how you want to access the information and structure accordingly. The other thing we found helpful is to use a common file structure for each project. So that means that each time you set up a new project or set up a new client, there should be some blanks that you need to fill in. So in our case, we would have subfolders within a client for brand assets, call recordings, videos, social media, blogs, et cetera, depending on whatever their scope is. So essentially organize your file sharing the way you would organize your file cabinet. You need to be able to structure it so you can actually find things. Also include folders for any shared assets that might be useful for your team. So sales presentations, sample deliverables. Having a digital file structure can be great from an efficiency perspective, because let's say somebody has developed a killer presentation for something. If they've done that using, especially, I mean, I'm really a big fan of G Suite. So if they've done that using a document or a presentation within Google, then you can copy it and edit it, and you can have multiple people edit documents and presentations and spreadsheets together according to the security. So it's just one of the things we found with PowerPoint is every time somebody if they're editing it on their own computer and then they're saving it to the shared folder, sometimes you can just get out of sync in terms of version. So that's one of the things that we really liked about Google. Let's see, the next thing that I wanted to share with you is digital signature considerations. So, first of all, full disclaimer, not an attorney, but, we do extensively use DocuSign, but our attorney has validated all the documents that are in DocuSign. So as with any contract, don't invent, don't get creative, and don't rely on LegalZoom. Ask your attorney. Also, as with any contract, you want to make sure that whoever is signing is authorized. So validate that before you send it out for signature. And then be sure that your digital signature software allows for those auto reminders that I mentioned. And then also give your client or employee or whoever needs to sign a heads up to be on the lookout for that contract email. Sometimes they do go to spam, and it's not necessarily the fault of the tool, but there's a number of email settings that if anything is coming from a platform as opposed to from an individual, that sometimes that your email will just send it to spam. So just be on the lookout for that. And then if in your business, this is kind of a little tip that we've learned, but if in your business, if you add scope on a regular basis to your clients, so in our case, we'll have a master agreement with our clients, and then for every time they add on a piece of work, we really need to have a separate statement of work. But it becomes really unruly for us to have to go back and create a new DocuSign for each little thing that a client might want to add on. So what we do is we had our attorney draft a master agreement that basically references our estimates as statement of works that will come under the master agreement. And then that allows us that we don't have to go back and get a full signature each time. So again, check with your attorney. That might not work for everyone, but that's something that has worked effectively for us. All right, let's talk about secure information exchange. So depending on your type of business, you may need different levels of security. Pretty much everyone is going to need encrypted password storage. Some of you might need encrypted email and forms. And then if you're a healthcare organization, obviously you need to be HIPAA compliant. So now your security goes to another level. So in terms of encrypted password storage, there's a number of tools out there, including LastPass, Dashlane, and Keeper. We use LastPass. One of the things that's nice about it is that we can set up different folders, and the passwords related to a certain area of our business are in that folder. So when somebody new joins, we can just give them access to that particular folder, and they immediately get all of the logins that they need. And same thing, if somebody leaves, then we can just remove them from the folder, and they're immediately removed from any of those accesses. What LastPass does, and these other password storage tools as well, is that they encrypt the password and they hide it. So that means that you can give somebody on your team access to a client's account without them ever actually seeing the password on the client's account. So, we have somebody within the company who is responsible for all of the passwords. So obviously they get to see everything, but anyone else on the team, it's kind of on a need to know level of access. Encrypted email is something that you want to think about if you are exchanging sensitive information like passwords, or if you need somebody to send you their credit card information, or whatever, which obviously for regulatory reasons we do suggest that you destroy after you receive it, but sometimes you need to actually get it in order to put it into whatever system you're using to encrypt it. So for that, there's a couple different forms of encrypted email. There's actually a number of them, but there's tools like Hushmail, like ActiveCampaign. We actually use both, but for the whenever we're getting access, getting passwords from clients, we use Hushmail. So we have a special email that if anybody sends a message to that email, it gets encrypted. So that helps in case, for whatever reason, it was interrupted in transmission, it would be illegible. We also use ActiveCampaign as our CRM tool, and that does encrypt emails as well. The other thing you want to think about is encrypted forms. So again, we have Hushmail on our website that when clients need to send us their passwords, there's actually a form that they enter, and then the results of that form go into our encrypted email. You can also use tools like JotForm, Google Forms, although Google does recommend that you don't use forms for sending super sensitive information like passwords, and then similarly ActiveCampaign as well. If you need to be HIPAA compliant, then there is a HIPAA form of Hushmail that you can use for forms and for email. FormStack is also a really good HIPAA compliant tool, and there is a HIPAA version of ActiveCampaign as well. For HIPAA compliant chat, Engage that I mentioned previously has a HIPAA version, and Live Chat also has a HIPAA version, and there's a number of others that you can check out as well. So some of the considerations with secure information exchange would be assigning someone to be your password keymaster. So someone really should be the overall admin for your encryption tool. Not only are they entering the new credentials when you receive them, but they would be the person who would troubleshoot any access issues, which are absolutely bound to happen. So you do need somebody who is your focal point for any issues where somebody can't get into an account. Consider embedding secure forms into your website for easy access. So any of those tools that I mentioned, Hushmail and the like, ActiveCampaign, you can get a little HTML snippet that you embedded in your website. So even though it looks like it's sitting on your website, it actually is still sitting within that encrypted platform. And then send form fill notifications to multiple emails, including one that opens a ticket. So when somebody does send you information, you want to get a notification to go and actually check that information has been received, because otherwise sometimes clients will send you something and it goes into this special encrypted space, but if nobody is watching it, you don't know that they've sent it. So make sure that you have a process in place for that. There's a number of ways that you can minimize security vulnerability. That would be an entire presentation in and of itself, and I certainly don't claim to be a security expert, but some of the things that my IT friends have shared with me is, first of all, the obvious password hygiene. So make sure that you are not using the same password for everything. Don't take your password and put it on a little sticky note and stick the sticky note on your computer, even if you are working from home. There's just some basic things that you want to make sure that you're doing to protect your passwords. And then it's also a good idea to have a set policy in place for how remote workers should manage their physical devices. So good idea is just in general, keep your laptops and devices in sight at all time. So, when we are able to travel again, leaving them in hotel rooms or leaving them in checked luggage is not a good idea. Have them in your carry-on, bring them with you. And then if the company owns the device, then make sure that it is protected with up-to-date antivirus software, with device encryption and with firewalls. And you'll want to make sure you have documented cybersecurity policies which designate which of the devices, whether they're employee or organization owned, can be used for what type of business activity. So that needs to be clearly articulated in your policies. The other thing to think about, if you do decide that you really like the idea of going virtual and you want to do more of that, is that having a bring your own device policy can actually be really good, because not everybody likes the same technology toys. And because more and more our software tools are becoming cloud-based, that there's no reason why everyone needs to have the same physical devices. So maybe you like Apple and somebody else likes Microsoft. Just allow them to bring whatever tool, and as long as if all of your software that they're accessing is compatible and is cloud-based, then you might want to consider providing an allowance for them to buy their own tool rather than having all of these remote assets that are in multiple people's homes that you need to manage. Now, there's some other virtual collaboration tools that I wanted to highlight as well, because we need to, as we move to a distributed virtual environment, we still need to collaborate as if we were all sitting in the same meeting room together. So I'll call out a few of them that we use. One of them you heard me mention a few minutes ago is Teamwork Spaces. So those little mini internal websites can actually be set up so that multiple people can either multiple people can access them, or you can have multiple people able to edit them as well. So you can use those as a collaborative workspace, or just as a library or a resource for training materials or for different reference materials that people might need to do their work. Teamwork Desk, as I mentioned, is a tool that can turn client emails directly into tickets. And one of the other things that it can do is you can create an online help file for FAQs. So for example, if you go to our website at zenchange.com, then you'll find that when you look under our client support tab, that there's a little button there that will lead you to frequently asked questions. Well, those frequently asked questions don't actually sit on our website, that sits on Teamwork Desk. And so what we tend to do is that whenever a client asks us something and we think, good question, somebody else might ask that, or if we find ourselves repeating ourselves with instructions on how to set something up or how to do something, we'll create an FAQ for it and put it out there. So now what we can do is the next person who asks, instead of somebody having to create the instructions from scratch, they just send them a link to the FAQ, which is a heck of a lot quicker. There's another tool that we like to use for meetings, especially strategic meetings, and we use it with our clients when we're talking about their brand strategy, is MindMeister. And that's a mind mapping tool that works really well for team virtual brainstorming. And if you've never done mind mapping, just think of it as a number of kind of interconnected bubbles that connect your ideas. So, for our case, we would have a central bubble that is talking about the client's brand, and we might have a bubble off of that talks about key messages, and another bubble that talks about their target market, and another bubble that talks about their geography. And sort of you can organize it any way that makes sense, but it's a great way for somebody who is facilitating to capture a conversation in an organized way. So, we found this really helpful when we're delivering our virtual workshops as well. So that's a tool that is worth checking out. And then good old Google Docs. I mentioned earlier that you have the ability to collaborate, whether it's in Google Docs or Google Sheets. But given that multiple people can get in there and access at the same time, you can actually just open up a Google Doc and use it as a whiteboard. So the next time you have a meeting and you need to share ideas, maybe you create some basic structure within your Google Doc, and then just everybody gets in there and types stuff as if they were writing on a whiteboard. Same thing with Google Sheets, which is really helpful to collaborate on financial planning or basic project planning. And then Calendly is another tool that we use, and that can connect with whether you have an Outlook calendar or a Google Calendar. And not only can you create a link, so for example, in your footer of your email, where anyone can book directly into your calendar without actually seeing specifically what you have on your calendar. That's one of the things that we really like. So whatever time is unblocked, somebody can book, but you can choose if you want to book additional blocks or to block off additional time where you don't want somebody to book. and then it won't show up as available for them. The other thing that's kind of cool with Calendly is that you can create group calendars. So let's say you regularly need your onboarding meetings to be with your account manager and a couple of your line of business managers. Well, you could create a shared calendar for them and send that to the client, and they can book whatever time works for them, but it will be a time that is actually available on all of the calendars that are linked. And then there's another tool that you might not use as often, but is still handy, and that's called TriCider. It's TRICIDER.com. What this allows you to do is survey your team and jointly view results. So think about now, especially as people are trying to transition to this virtual work environment, that it can be pretty challenging for them. They may have different things that they're adapting well at, and other things that they're finding to be a little bit more difficult. Not a bad idea to maybe create a joint survey, and on a even on a weekly basis to start with, that you can ask everybody to jump in and answer their questions. And as people are answering, you're actually going to be able to see. You can set the settings, but if you have it fully open, that who answered what and how many people are voting for one answer versus another. And I've actually also heard of some companies using tools like this just to create some fun team questionnaires or team quizzes on different things as well. So a lot of times when people move to a new environment, they feel out of control. They may be concerned that they don't have as much structure. They may be dealing with new technology. So just finding creative ways to use the tools to help bring them together and make them feel more connected is really, really helpful. And speaking of helping employees, I want to touch on some employee training as well. And when you think about virtual training, you really think about an LMS or a learning management system, or at least we do. And there's a number of things that you can use, a number of different tools that you can use for this. And if you were to Google learning management system or LMS, you're going to find a number of different platforms that you could potentially adopt. If you want to keep it simple, you can actually set up a WordPress internal website that would have a login, and there's plugins that you can use with WordPress that basically turn it into a learning management system, which allows you to basically have people read through different sections, read different documents. You can set up a quiz at the end to make sure that they reach a certain level of competency before you consider that they've passed. You can notify their manager when they've completed a particular test or quiz. So that's a really handy tool that you can structure. You can also use Teamwork Spaces, as I mentioned to you, as an internal website to organize some information pages according to different topics. Google Drive is a super simple way, or whatever you're using for your shared document storage as well. Having folders that have specific information that people can reference, and you can set the security on those folders to whether or not they should be view only or something that everyone can edit. There's another tool called learnworlds.com that we're actually using to stand up our marketing masterclasses that I'll share with you as they start to evolve. And then there's any number of third-party content sources that you can use. Some good ones out there are Udemy.com, which has a lot of very practical how-to courses, and a number of the established educational institutions like Harvard and MIT and others actually put their content for free onto platforms like Coursera or edX. And it's nice if you know that that there's a course that maybe isn't super long, that you can either assign that as a task to your employees to take it, or if something is really quick, you can incorporate it into a team training session. But there's a lot of both general leadership courses. There's a number of industry-specific online courses that you can look for as well. So some of the trainings with employee training, or the considerations with employee training rather, are to, first of all, work with each employee as part of their quarterly annual review process, however often you're doing reviews, to understand what they want to do, what they, where they want to develop their skills, and then agree on a training budget and classes. So some of their homework might be to go and take some of those courses on Coursera or Udemy, if that's an area where they want to really develop their expertise. And those courses are anywhere from free to cheap. So really all you're looking at is absorbing the time that it'll take, which is well worth it in order to help them to develop their skills. Make sure that you assign the training as tasks with a time budget so that it actually happens, because it's very easy to have that conversation and say, oh yes, I want to learn how to do graphic design. Great, here's the class, and you're going to go off and take it. But then they get busy and, a year goes by and they're like, yeah, I never did take that class. So as a manager, if you actually assign the training task to them, or even encourage them to set up their own training objectives and tasks with you, and then they can manage it for your approval, then that can work really well. And then don't forget to use those Friday meetings for training. So training doesn't have to be a super expensive thing. So a lot of small businesses think, oh, we can't afford training, but training can be one of your team members educating the rest of your team on something that they're really good at. It could be you as a leader sharing knowledge with your team. So just get creative and figure ways to incorporate training into your work week. And then work environment considerations. So some people work really well from home, other people don't work from home. And so for people who don't work well from home, just try to be flexible on where they can work. Now, once we're through this whole isolation that we're going through now, you may find that continuing to be virtual can be an effective way to run your business. And one of the things that we've learned is that some people work really well sitting at home, and other people actually want to be in a shared office space. So we give that as an option, and we actually have one of our benefits is to help compensate employees who do want to work in a shared office space. And so that can be something that you can consider as a policy. But for people who are working at home, here's some guidelines or suggestions that we found are helpful. One is shower and dress each morning as though you were going out. There's just something mentally about when you actually get yourself ready in the morning that mentally you might be a little bit more prepared to actually sit down and do work. And then try to work in a quiet room if you can, with a door you can close. This can be challenging if you're now in a situation where there's multiple people trying to work from home and be on conference calls, but having everyone on a conference call sitting at the kitchen table probably is not going to be effective. So maybe when you're on a call, you go into your bedroom and you take the call from there, and then you can go back out into the open environment when you know that you can be quiet. And then plan for good internet and devices. I think we're all praying that the internet holds up during this crisis that we're through. But make sure that you've got really good connectivity, because nothing is more frustrating than when you're trying to work from home and your internet's not working. Work at an actual desk. Now, this is not universal. Some people actually work well sitting on the sofa with the dog, but a lot of people really need an actual desk to sit at to feel focused. Make sure you've got good lighting and plan your breaks. Sometimes just getting up and going outside and walking around a little bit can allow you to come back refreshed. And then one big one is try to train your family members not to interrupt unless you're on a break. So just because you're sitting at home, it doesn't mean that they can just wander in because they need a mental break at that moment and interrupt whatever it is that you're working on. So there's some boundaries that it's really helpful to establish. And then focus. I don't know if you remember that one of my favorite movies, Up, with the little dog who keeps getting distracted by the squirrel. but many virtual employees can be really distracted by text and phone interruptions. So there's just a lot of activity going on your computer, and it's really, I think we're trained by our mobile devices that every time there's a text, we look at it. So when you're working in a virtual environment, sometimes every time that you see the little blinking light or the little notification on your chat bubble that you want to stop what you're doing and go over and check it out. So that can end up leaving you at the end of the day with having accomplished precisely zero of what you had planned to do in the morning. So some of the tips that we've learned is, first of all, just try getting up a little earlier and knocking out any of the tasks where you're going to need to concentrate before the phone starts ringing or before the chat starts going off. And then block time on your calendar for longer tasks. It's perfectly okay to let the team know via chat that, okay, there's an hour, I'm focused on doing this next thing, I'm going under, so I'm not available for that next hour, and put your chat on Do Not Disturb. And then try alternating your work hours with your email and chat hours, because it's not realistic either for you to just completely go under for 8 hours a day. But if you alternate and then allow yourself during your hour of distraction to go back to work chatter and check your chat and check your email, and then now you're up to date and you can go back to completing your tasks. And then for some people, we found this with our team that, maybe spreading your week into Saturday, working a few shorter hours during the week, and then adding Saturday to your work week if that's a better day to focus. And if you're going to end up being less stressed when you come in on Monday, knowing that you don't have this huge backlog of things that you need to get done. Company culture is the last area that I wanted to touch on, and I wanted to share with you, we actually did a survey with our team, and we asked them, what do you like best about working virtually? And their number one thing was being able to work in different cities or countries if they need to. So maybe you have a situation where you want to go spend the summer with your parents. You can work out of their house. You're virtual. All you really need is to have your device with you and your connectivity. They also really like that having a flexible schedule allows them to work personal responsibilities into their day, whether it's picking up kids from school or taking the dog to the vet, and not feeling guilty about that. They also like not getting pulled into impromptu meetings that break up their day. And for people who really do enjoy working at home, it's quiet and sometimes makes it easier to concentrate. It also allows them to work at times when they're most productive. I find our writers especially like to work in the middle of the night, and that works for them when the house is quiet, and that's perfectly fine when you're in a virtual environment. In particular, this is my personal favorite, no driving during rush hour, which none of us really like. And you can also save a bunch of money on coffee and lunch if you're working from home. Now, in order to balance that, we also asked what they like least about working virtually. And many of them actually miss the interaction of being in an office. They miss that social environment. So that's something that we really had to take into account as we thought about our culture. Also, family doesn't always respect their work time, and people do kind of walk in when you're in the middle of something, or just assume that you can take care of the kids at that moment, even when you're just about to get on a conference call. For some people, being too close to the fridge can be a little bit of a danger. And then some people, as I mentioned, just don't focus well at home. So it's important to build a strong culture when you aren't together. Some of these things I've mentioned, but daily team check-in calls is critical. Having a weekly team meeting with your video on helps to make people feel more connected. And then try, as much as working virtually is great, have annual or biannual in-person meetings. There's still nothing quite like a human-to-human contact, even though we need to be socially distanced at the moment. We also keep our general Slack channel pretty open, so people can share jokes, they can share news, they can have general banter, the type of talk that you might have in an office setting. We also try, and this is something that I think we're continuing to learn over time, and I know it's a struggle for many companies, but hire carefully in order to assess fit, and allow other team members to also interview in order to assess fit, especially when somebody has never worked from home before. If they've never been in a virtual setting, it could really go either way. So we just need to be very careful about bringing people in where that's a brand new environment for them, unless they're super excited about it. We also have everyone contribute to company content according to whatever their skills are. So, we may have multiple people helping write our blogs, creating our social media, creating videos, brainstorming new service ideas, design ideas. So we really try to, in addition to whatever clients you're working on, everybody gets a say in terms of some ideas and brainstorming they have to make the company better. And when it comes down to it, as the leader, setting the tone for culture is ultimately on you, and you really need to set that direction for your team. So there's some things that we've pulled together in order to help with your COVID-19 virtual response, and I'll just highlight some of them here. So some of the support services, for example, we're finding that despite many businesses being somewhat crippled or really hampered by having to be entirely virtual, or in some cases, like restaurants, having to, close down completely or adopt a completely different model. But there's other businesses that actually have a really strong way that they can contribute to their city or to their local geography. And for example, there may be healthcare practices who are going virtual. There may be attorneys who are able to go virtual and provide advice that can be really helpful for other businesses in this situation. So for businesses like that, we have a little package where we'll create a landing page that's specific to their COVID-19 service. We'll include all of that design. We'll set up chat on the landing page. We will integrate a form, a response form, and an email drip campaign to follow up. We also have a communications package where we'll send out a couple of e-blasts and 4 social media posts, and this can be obviously modified depending on whatever the organization needs. But it's really, really important in this situation to be present, to not only reassure your clients and your contacts, and to share whatever your response plan is, but also to talk about areas where you can help. For some organizations, a lot of organizations, as a matter of fact, they'll have a message that will pop up on their website regarding their situation in terms of whether or not they're open, how they're operating, if they are doing business virtually. So we're helping with some of those messages. In some cases, they need something that's a little bit deeper. So we'll create a page on their website that describes their response, and we'll include the copy and the design for that. And then other organizations, especially those that have larger groups of employees or who are dealing with the general public, want to stand up a microsite related to COVID-19. And so for that, we'll create we have a little package where we'll do a 6-page standalone website where we can talk about things like health resources, working remotely, any specific coronavirus policies, social distancing reminders in 101, FAQs, and key contacts. And as businesses are going virtual, there's a number of things that we are helping with there as well. So, first of all, there's more businesses that are finding that if they can't have meetings, they need to have webinars. And some of these webinars are internal and some of them are external. So we can help set up an informational webinar, including create the landing page, create an integrated form with a drip email event countdown, send an e-blast via newsletter to your list to encourage people to sign up. We'll set up the webinar software. Again, we recommend Zoom. And optionally, we can even help pull together the presentation and all of the graphic design and the copy for that presentation. We're also finding that people really need a different way to connect with their audience, and given that we can't physically meet each other, virtual is really obviously the way to go. So podcasts, which already were on the rise, are becoming more important. And that's a way to really promote your personal brand for people to get a feel for what it would be like to work with you when they can't actually meet with you. So for that, we have a little package where we'll create the channel artwork, a written description. We will have a professionally recorded intro by voice talent. We'll include a royalty-free music track. And we will submit your podcast to Spotify, Google, and iTunes for approval. We also have an add-on service where we can edit your video that you provide into a concise and clear podcast, or we can actually sit down and record it with you and then edit it. We're also, we've been doing workshops for quite some time. Some of our regular workshops we offer virtually, and now we're offering a virtual workshop on how to take your business virtual. So for that, we can prepare we recommend a 5-hour online workshop on how to create your ongoing virtual plan. It includes us incorporating some interviews and with your employees and key stakeholders and preparing, and then we actually have a fully documented wrap-up that we provide. And then the final area, as I mentioned throughout this discussion, that there's implications in terms of your policies and procedures. So we have some policy and procedure guidelines that we can share. We have a little package that we'll create for you where we'll cover such things as setting up your workplace, virtual etiquette, online work hours, accepted tool use, information security, expectations of your employees, and task management. So we're hoping with all of these tools and services that we'll really be able to help small business and startups and even larger enterprises to take their business virtual and to make that really a successful part of their culture. There's a number of other resources out there that can help you, and we will make those available to any of our listeners, including if you need help migrating your practice to telehealth, or if you're a business who needs a response plan. Obviously there's chat services, there's, you might want to consult with an attorney regarding whether or not COVID-19 constitutes force majeure and other contract implications. Think about your estate plan. Who's going to sign documents for your business if for any reason you're incapacitated? If you were incapacitated for 2 or 3 weeks, for example, do you have a contingency plan in place, and can someone run payroll for you? And what if you have a business liability insurance policy, and what if they don't pay? You'll need to consult an attorney for that. Think about resources to have your space disinfected or to get advice on how to clean up a space. So these are all wonderful resources that we have within our network. And I would be very happy to share those with anyone who needs that help. So thank you for listening today. I hope you found this information to be valuable. I know it's quite a bit. Honestly, it is really just scratching the surface of what it takes to have a fully operational virtual business, but I can't tell you how worth it is, not only when something like this happens, but it really does allow as a business for you to get the best people, because people are really looking for more flexibility today. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, what we're seeing with COVID-19 is going to drive a social change. I'm convinced of it. And I hope that if this has been at all helpful for you to get your business ready, that you'll share it, and please reach out if you have any questions.
Valerie, I'm going to unmute you here for a second and just see if we have any other questions that have come up, or feel free if you guys want to ask any other questions in the chat regarding the presentation or anything else that you're seeing in terms of going virtual.
No, I think we got all the questions answered. We had some good ones about different chat tools to use. And I think, like we said, we're big fans of Slack, and it's one of the more cost-effective ones. You get tons of features, and I think that one will work pretty well. Let's see here. Another one about the project management tools. I don't know if you guys can see all these answers, but like we said earlier at the beginning of the webinar, we really love teamwork, but I will say it's super comprehensive and there's a lot of options. So if you're just getting started and this is the first time your team is using project management software, you could do something like Asana, which is a little easier to dive into, I think. And then if you have a really visual team, or if you have a team that's based on, I'm trying to think of other things that you would use it for, but Trello is another one that you could use just for higher level tracking.
Yeah.
Let me see.
We've got another.
I think the time cards, that was another good question. So if you have a team that, you know, like all of a sudden tomorrow you're all virtual and, you know, you need to get your project management software set up, what you can do before you have that all built out is you can actually just put a task in for each of your team members that says Wednesday, March 18th, and they can log into that task and they can just track their time. You know, if you don't have all the specific things in there yet, if you don't have all the phone calls, if you don't have all the, you know, details, it's still really easy to just keep track of time. And like Deanne mentioned earlier, a lot of them have timers. So, you know, when they get in the morning and they get in, air quotes, get into their office, they can turn that clock on. When they take a break, they turn it off. When they leave for lunch, they turn it off. And it's super easy. And it, you know, it takes a little bit to get into the habit. I have to say, I think there was one point when I first started logging time like this where I had like 360 hours all at once because I left it running over a weekend or something crazy like that. But all those things can be edited, and it's just, you know, practice makes perfect, I guess.
We've got a great question here about, you know, the pandemic, as we were talking about, will be a catalyst for social change, and then a lot of solo consultants, and not even solo consultants. I would say there's a lot of small businesses who really, they've grown their business through personal connectivity and through networking. So, you know, the face of networking is changing, and that's something that I didn't bring up here, but is also important. So for, you know, for those of you who happen to be in a BNI chapter, I think you've probably seen that the recent chapter meetings are going virtual. So they're using a form of Zoom as well. But, you know, when you think about how we've grown our business and events and through, you know, through attending networking events, you know, it's really is a game changer. So, you know, one of the things that I have to recommend is, you know, when you think about, you go to a networking event, you gather a lot of business cards, and you're not usually closing business at the networking event. You're usually setting follow-ups where you're going to go grab a coffee with somebody and talk more about each other's business. And then out of that, things kind of evolve. So now I think some of your networking in terms of gathering information, that could be LinkedIn. So you could find the connections on LinkedIn, and rather than just leaving it to chatting with someone on LinkedIn, if it seems like you guys might have synergies, set up a Zoom call and have that virtual coffee with them and talk about each other's business. So it is a mindset shift, but the fundamentals of still making those one-to-one connections are still going to hold true, even though they're not physically together. We have another question that's come up about, what do you think is the best way to prioritize communications, email, text? There's so many tools, info can get lost virtually. Oh yes, we so feel your pain on that. So I would say it depends. You can join here too, but it kind of depends on the type of communication. So what we try to set guidelines on is, you know, if it's something that is you know, you have to say a lot, that'd be a little bit too much for a text, then send an email, but then send somebody a quick text or Slack, and hey, just sent you an email that you can check out and, you know, let me know what you think. And really kind of focus texts on just quick little questions and answers. And if it's something that you need to follow up on, then, you know, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, set a task So, you know, because things can really, really get lost even more so if you're working virtually. So, you know, if you Slack someone something, or you email, or you text them something, just set yourself a little task in whatever your task management is, you know, follow up on XYZ. That way, when you go in, you know, the next day and you see your list, you've gotten that thing started before, in case that person hasn't responded to you.
Yeah, I would say another thing that really helps me too, especially because I manage our team and I manage a lot of clients, and I mean, I'm an iPhone junkie. I have 8,000 notifications coming in every second. And what I really try to do is compartmentalize my communication channels. So I know if Slack comes up on my phone, and the other nice thing too is with Slack, you can actually have different workspaces. So say you manage multiple teams that should be in different channels, you can have an icon related to those. So I know if something comes up on Slack, I can instantly look and I can see if it's a Zen change icon, that means it's something related to work and I need to answer it and I need to check it out. I have a really hard time keeping up with texts, and I know Deanne is a master of this, but I find that super hard. So I really try to keep all of my work communication on Slack. The mobile app is amazing. And then I definitely think too, if you're asking someone to do something, if you're going to assign a request or you have something urgently, like Deanne said, definitely either get that to an email or get it into your management software, because those things just, it's incredible how fast they get lost.
Yeah, good. Well, listen, thank you everyone for participating today. You'll get a follow-up email that has the recording as well as the slides. I know there were some things that just, you know, I think the entire world is on Zoom right now. So I think there was just some connectivity challenges, that a couple things weren't loading. So I want to make sure that you get those resources, because there was a lot of good points on there. So we'll make sure that we get those out to you as well. And as anything comes up, as you guys are moderate through to, you know, some of these changes, you know, it is big, and just, I would encourage you to just use this as a resource. Feel free to, you know, ping us with questions and that, and we'd certainly be happy to help you with the session. So thank you everyone, and have a great afternoon and be healthy.